Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. The two primary things that I want to talk to you today are about how we may let other people tell us what they think about us or what we need to do, and we accept it. I've had this happen recently to me with two specific instances. So one of them was I did some episodes about how to heal when we're blindsided, and I was dropped from a mastermind I was in, and the feedback that I got from the person leading the mastermind was they felt that it was my fear that was holding me back. I've really sat with that, and what I'm really starting to see is it's really not about my fear, it's about something else. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about this, but I want to give you a sneak peek of where we're going, so you might want to stay tuned. The other thing that I want to talk about, and it's a work in progress, it's something that I've been sitting with for about a year now. And again, my intention in talking about this is just to talk about my side of it. It's very possible that if we brought the other person in, they might have an entirely different point of view. In fact, I'm sure that they do, because that's part of what the conflict is. This isn't about right or wrong, but it's just about how I realized that I let how this person was responding to me. I felt like I was the one with the problem. And when I had a similar experience with someone else who responded entirely differently, it was kind of the wake up call of like, oh my gosh, maybe this really isn't me. And this is in a relationship where sometimes I feel like I'm not seen and heard. If I'm feeling like I'm missing the person or I'm feeling disappointed, if I bring it up, it pulls for something that this person just, in my estimation, hasn't worked on. And so instead of them being able to go like, tell me what that's about for you, it triggers shame. And then I'll talk about some of the messages that I've gotten from this person who's very close to me, very well educated, has done a lot of their own work. And, we still have wounding and we still have healing to do. And again, you're hearing my side of the story. So it's very possible that if both of us were sitting here, you'd get a different perspective. So I just want to be mindful about that. But I was really kind of astounded that for the last year, I've been really grappling with this. I ended up reaching out to a therapist and did some internal family systems. I told you I recently reached out to another therapist. I'm doing a new training on attachment and somatic healing because I know I've got wounding around my attachment issues. And because this is a significant relationship and I keep bumping up against this stuff, I just kept thinking that it was me. And I have a part in it, but I'm also seeing where, because of how this person responded to me, because of their own limitations, from my perspective, I'm going to call them limitations. They may call it something else, but I let it be about me. And I guess there's a part of me that's just really surprised because I've been in therapy. I'm a therapist. I'm a coach. I feel like I'm really good about looking at my own stuff. So my hope is in sharing this with you that you will see that maybe there are areas where we just tend to think that we're the cause of things when sometimes we are, sometimes we have a part, and sometimes we're not. Let's start with the first example that I gave you. So in this mastermind, there's some things that I still need to do. I really need to get some sponsors for the podcast. I'm working with somebody to do a questionnaire to get an idea of the demographics of who the listeners are so that I can share that with potential sponsors. With my son moving out, I'll do another episode on that. July 1st, he's moving up to Long Beach, which is between an hour and a half and 2 hours away, depending on traffic. He's been doing my editing. He says he's going to keep doing it. I just think with school and work, he's not going to have the time to do it. And it's really time for me to monetize the podcast. Everything I do is out of pocket. It takes a lot of time. It's definitely a labor of love. But my gremlins are going like, why are you talking about this? This has nothing to do with anything else. But it does tie together. So in order to reach out to sponsors, I'd love to be able to talk about who the listeners are because I don't have a sense of who y'all are, and I'd love to know that. when I took this mastermind and I shared about the group is too big, these are some things that aren't working for me, the feedback that I got was it was my fear that was holding me back. And you know what? It's not my fear. It's that new things, big things overwhelm me. And the kind of support that I love the most is when somebody sits with me and helps me figure stuff out. That's really what it's about. And I feel really blessed that there's somebody in my life who will do this with me. And I don't need to talk about what the arrangement is. But anyways, we spent some time this morning and we met last week, and we're just going to meet once a week and she's going to help me get some of this stuff done. That's what support looks like for me. And I have to say, there's a part of me that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need support. And there's a part of me that I wish I didn't need it. I wish I could do it independently. And you know what? I can't. And I feel like, how can I be a therapist and a coach and be saying I hate asking for help. And it's really what I need and what works for me. And so I'm just naming it. We need other people. We need help. We need support. And the kind of support that almost always works best for me is having somebody with me. And it's actually kind of interesting. My son has to drive up to Long Beach this Sunday for a face-to-face for a job. He had the job interview, and I just think the owner wants to put eyeballs on him and make sure that he's not some wacko. That's my interpretation. I could be wrong. And it's very sweet. My son is 20, and he asked my husband if he'd drive up to Long Beach with him. And obviously my husband's not going to go to the interview with him. But I think that my son's love language is very similar to mine, where he really likes company and support and people going with him and being with him. And it's so interesting that I don't have any judgment or shame that this is what my son wants, yet I have judgment and some shame around this is what I need. I don't know. And I have to tell you, with COVID, we're on week 13 since the shelter-in-place order. Well, we're probably on week 14 now, since the shelter-in-place order started back in March of 2020. If you're listening to this sometime in the future, we had a global pandemic, and 2020 was just really a really challenging year. But anyways, the isolation is really starting to get to me, and I just do not have that many people right now locally that are available to spend time with. I'm really seeing that I need to be getting out of the house more. I need to be doing more things. I think that the emotional heaviness of what's going on in the world has really been impacting me. And because I have this need for engagement, I use social media because I get a connection, but it also really drains me. And there's a part of me we're in the middle of making history right now, and I want to know what's going on, but it's just not working for me. I really feel like I've been letting the heaviness of the emotions of what I'm feeling really drive how I'm living my life, and it is not working. So this morning I did take myself on an exercise walk. I walk the dog a couple times a day, but that's really not anything that gets my heartbeat up. And just really looking at, I need to be putting more structure in my life, and I need to be moving my body, and I need to be getting out, and I really need to disengage from the things that are draining my energy, find some new ways to get connection, and to also do some creative projects. And again, this is yeah, you've talked about this before a lot. How many times have I talked about using electronics and the things that I do? And I was thinking this morning, I was walking and listening to this great podcast. I'll have to look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. But this woman was talking about people that may not be really happy with their bodies right now. And I'm all for health at every size. I'm for body positivity. I may get a little messy in my language. You're just going to have to bear with me. But I was thinking about how many people, myself included, have been using food for comfort during this time. And it just makes so much sense and I was thinking about, what are the foods that I've been eating? It's kind of summertime foods, play foods, kids foods, stuff that I don't normally eat. And we've been in this pandemic for some of us, 13, 14, 15 weeks, a couple of months. The tension in the country, especially if you're in the US, it's pretty darn intense right now. It's very intense. And so it makes sense that we would want to have something that we can count on. And I've talked with a number of friends that many of us have kind of adjusted to the new normal. And then when something happens that disrupts that, we just kind of lose our shirt because, how many more changes can we stand? And how much more can we stand having what feels like having the rug pulled out from under us? I know these are extreme ways of talking, but even this morning, I don't know if I told you all about the woman that yelled at me when I was walking my dog. It's someone that lives in the neighborhood. I've seen her for years. I didn't know where she lived, and I was walking the dog one morning, and I was apparently in front of her house, unbeknownst to me, and she's yelling at me to hurry up and move on. And I'm confused. I'm poloing with a friend, and I keep turning around. And she's like, "This is my house, and keep moving." And you're on your phone. Well, my dog is blind and she's sniffing, and I didn't know this was your house. And so I let the dog sniff and I moved on, and then I had to stop the polo and I cried. It was really upsetting to me. It hurt my feelings. It felt mean. It felt unkind. I sat with it for a day and I wrote her a kind letter, but I just said, hey, we're all going through a hard time right now, and this is what you said to me, and whether I'm on my phone or not is really not any of your business, is not relevant to the situation. And had you just let me know that this was your house and you needed to get in, you still may have needed to wait a minute or two. I have people that their dogs are in front of my house and I walk into the street and I wait politely for them to move on. I just said, I left your house and I cried. It really stinks. This is a time when we need more compassion. And I left the letter at her house, and I've seen her when I've been inside working because I face the street. I've seen her walk by, and there's a part of me that wants to go out and yell at her. And when I walk by her house, like this morning, I was thinking, I just wanted to get nasty. And I thought, okay, I think there's a part of us that just wants to go off on somebody because many of us have just endured a lot. For some of us, there's not really an end in sight right now with the pandemic, with what's going on politically, looking at systematic racism. It's a challenging time, especially if you're here in the US. And so I think for me, like sometimes I almost just want somebody like just push me a little bit harder so I can just dispel all of this pent up frustration and anger and rage and this sense of injustice and unfairness. And, so I think many of us are kind of like loose cannons just waiting to go off. So as I walked by her house, her dogs were barking. Part of me wanted to bring my dog just to make her dogs bark. I do have lots of very creative ways that I'd like to get back at people. And I thought, what, is this how I want to be spending my energy? And so I decided to shine light on her house and to bless her and to just kind of move on. I can stay caught up in that energy. There's nothing wrong with it. And it just tears me down. So anyways, going back to what I started with. So I'm realizing in this one instance that it's not my fear that's holding me back. It's my overwhelm. And when there are things that are big to do, what I need to do is sometimes I have to get information. Sometimes I have to watch YouTube videos. Sometimes I have to read about it. Sometimes I have to break it up into little steps. I need to keep a list of what I need to do. The thing that helps me the most is to have somebody that will sit with me that also has the skill set where I struggle. And I noticed even this morning when we were working together, I'd hit a point where it's like, I just would feel like, I just can't figure this out. But I think because somebody was there with me and I had that little internal voice of like, you can do this. It's like, it's okay. Take a breath. You can do this. We got some great work done. Had I not really had this awareness, I would have bought into that thing of somebody telling me that it was fear that was keeping me from moving forward. And it's not fear. It's like, I need some support. So that's one situation. Second one is a little bit more complicated. Almost a year ago, this is someone I've known for many, many years. We have a very good and very close relationship. Someone who's really shown up for me, has been there, and we haven't had a lot of direct conflict. I think it's been such a long time ago, I haven't thought about it. I think what was going on is that I just wasn't feeling really seen and heard. This is someone that I use Marco Polo with. And I just felt like when I would talk about things, the person didn't respond. That's what my recollection is. And on the day that we had this kind of the first bump, it was a big day. There was something going on that was a big event. And this person asked, is everything okay? And I told them. And I cried and they didn't hear me. And the more they didn't hear me, the more upset I got. And I know that this is this is a very dramatic way, but this is what it felt like to me. It felt like I'm injured and I'm bleeding, and the person's talking around me being injured, and the more they talk around it without directly addressing what's going on, I just kind of felt like I continued to bleed until I was bleeding out, and it was just a very powerless feeling. I'm sure this has to do with my attachment injuries. I'm sure it has to do with my abandonment issues. I own that part in it. And had this person been able to go like, I'm so sorry, that feels really terrible. I'm so sorry you didn't feel seen and heard, probably would have gone a long way. But because the story that I tell myself is, this triggers a sense of shame and inadequacy for the other person, that they have some history where they didn't feel like they were enough. They didn't show up for someone. I don't know. So when I express that I'm not feeling seen and heard, that it brings up a story of inadequacy for them. And because they don't want to go there, they go into a place of defending. We all do it. It's very normal. What's happened over the last year, though, is that when other little injuries have come up and I've mentioned it, I get the same response, and it just doesn't feel very good. And I feel like I'm being vulnerable and sharing what's going on, and the person just doesn't respond to me. So over the course of the last year, I've just decided that there are certain things that I just don't share because I don't get the response that I need, and it creates more of an injury and more of a wound for me. And there's enough things that I get in the relationship that make it worthwhile to stay in the relationship. Then during the pandemic, it's been hard because, again, this person has way more demands that are being put on them. And a number of my close friends do. Now that they've got kids home, now that they're doing schooling and running their business from home and whatever else they're doing, I get it. I finally felt comfortable enough a couple weeks ago to say something like, hey, I just want to let you know I miss you. I miss our friendship. I miss the connection. I'm not asking you to do anything. Like, what comes up for me is I get very defensive. Like, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just letting you know how I feel. Again, we pull it back and forth, and it wasn't until, sometime later that the person acknowledged it, but it wasn't really, it's like, yeah, I'm really busy and blah, 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 as opposed to, gosh, I get that you really miss this time that we have. Like, I really hear that that's important to you. I'm not saying this is what the person would have to say, but it just felt like there wasn't a direct acknowledgement. So again, it's like, what's the point of sharing how I'm feeling directly in this relationship when I don't feel like my feelings are acknowledged? And I shared with you a few weeks ago that I'd started therapy with someone new. And at the end of the session, I may not have been very skillful about how I asked for it, but I said something to the effect of like, I just wanted to hear that I was easy to work with, because I just went deep really quickly. And the therapist did that typical thing of, well, we started out the session by you saying that you wanted to be present for you. And, if I gave that to you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, is it possible that I can be present for me and you can also acknowledge that? I may not have been very skillful in what I was asking. What I just would have liked is an acknowledgement that I go deep fast, and that is, it's nice as a therapist to work with that. And then the therapist said something about, well, what if I didn't enjoy working with you? And my response was, well, I don't work with people I don't enjoy working with. There's not a point in that. So it left me feeling very injured, and I felt like, did I ask for something that was wrong or that I shouldn't have? So I reached out to a few of my therapist friends just to get a reality check, because I felt like I did this really deep work for the first time with this therapist, and then it left me feeling really injured and that I'd done something wrong. So I reached out to this person who immediately said, hey, let's get on a phone call if you want. I'm available. I'd love to talk to you. So we talked. But one of the things that they said is something to the effect of, you have a specific way that you want people to respond to you. And I just internally kind of went like, oh, here it is again. And I thought, I'm already feeling injured from this interaction with this therapist. I'm trying to make sure that, like, am I okay? Did I do something wrong? I made a conscious choice, like, I'm not going to process this. But because it kind of hit me hard, I said, I just want to make sure that I'm clear that I heard you correctly. And I repeated it, and they said yes. So we kind of wrapped up the phone call, and I'm like, okay, thanks. And it hurt me. It was what it felt like is, you want people to be a certain way around you, as opposed to, yeah, I want to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And I don't think there's a darn thing that's wrong with that. And then I did think it was interesting that later that afternoon, the person sent a polo back to me and said, like, hey, just want to check in and see how you're doing. And then texted me later on asking if I was doing okay. And what I'm wondering is if on some level they knew that that comment was hurtful. I don't know. I just don't know. And I'd really made a decision that I just wasn't going to talk about it. And since the pandemic has started, we had a pattern of communicating
almost daily, sometimes a couple times a day. Sometimes we'd go a few days without poloing, but it was very frequent. That's changed. So we're talking about, over 3 months now of this change where this person has not been as available to me. I get it. I totally get it. A few weeks ago, this person had said, I noticed that, you're not poloing as much as you used to. And I've used this analogy in a previous episode where I was there playing tennis. Here I am. I'm going to polo you. Are you going to polo me back? And the person's playing chess. I'm going to think about it for a couple days, and then I'm going to go checkmate. I mean, again, this is my version of the story, but it's like I have a really high need for engagement. That's just what I need, and I don't get very much of it. It's pacing. If I'm showing up and waiting, and that leaves me feeling uncomfortable, then I'm going to drop back and I'm going to figure out, how are you able to show up in this relationship? And I'm going to exert an energy level that's close to that. And then I'm going to take the energy that I'm not getting in this relationship and I'm going to find some other places where people are able to engage with me in a way that feels satisfying. It's not a judgment. It's just, where am I going to invest my time and energy where I'm going to feel like I get what I need? But I wasn't able to respond to this person because it felt like if I bring it up, we're going to get into it, and I don't want to get into it. Then I had this experience with Jen Perry, and I've shared with you before that from the moment I met Jen, I've been very transparent with her. The first time we met to collaborate on the online HSP course, she was late. And this is almost, I guess, a year ago now. I figured if we were going to be working together and she was going to be late, that was going to be hard for me. Once I understood what the being late was about, and Jen helped me understand that beautifully, I have so much room, and being late isn't an issue for me in the way that it was before. So I did an interview with someone a couple months after I did that. I talked about this thing with Jen, and she's like, I know people being on time is really important to you. And then I kind of felt like, well, it used to be. It's not so much anymore now that I get what it's about. But when I first met Jen, I said, hey, I need to let you know I have this thing about people being late. And she was very apologetic, and we ended up running the first beta online HSP course. And we talked about this in group. What Jen so beautifully showed me is when people, at least at this time, wouldn't show up, it felt like they didn't care about me. And because Jen was able to say, I hear that this is really important to you, and I care about you, and I care about the relationship, I will do my best to show up on time. Sometimes I don't, because that's about me and it's not about you. But she met me at the place where really it wasn't about her being on time. It was about feeling like I was important, I was being seen, and I was being heard. And from that time on, it no longer was an issue about the time, because Jen was so able to receive what my feelings were, and I felt so seen and heard. And I think often we do this thing around like taking out the trash, or people either following through with requests that we have or not, and we argue on that level of, well, you didn't take the trash out, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And what it's really about is, do I matter? Am I important? Are my needs important? And I can be important and somebody cannot meet my needs, but if we're talking about my need to feel seen and heard, once that's addressed, then whether the trash is taken out or not is not really the issue. But when we don't talk about what's underneath things, we argue about the trash. I hope that makes sense. So what happened is Jen and I also polo. She lives, across the United States. I've been really okay with the pace of our communication again since the pandemic. There's just been a lot going on. Jen just got really busy with some other things. And so I poloed her, last week. And I said, hey, I know you have a lot going on. I know you're busy. I'm sure this doesn't have anything to do with me, but I'm feeling like I'm wanting to put my energy somewhere else because I'm missing you and I'm starting to feel hurt. If you can respond, I would love that. If you can't, that's okay. And I felt really vulnerable doing that and having this kind of rupture in this other relationship where when I talk about not feeling seen and heard or missing someone, I don't get what I want. And I feel like, you don't have to do it. I'm just saying it. Jen called me right away and we talked. And what she said is, I see that as an act of love, you telling me that you wanted to put your energy somewhere else. I see that as an act of love because you are pulling me in. And my life is so busy that I'm juggling so many balls that sometimes the ball falls and it rolls under the couch. So I joked and said, so if I show you a sign of a dust bunny, which is me, is that a way to let you know that I feel like I've fallen under the couch and I'm gathering dust? And we laughed about it. I can't tell you how incredibly empowering it was for her to say, I get it. I get it. And she said, I really do my best to show up for you. It's really hard for me. If you feel angry about it, if you feel sad, I can manage those feelings that you're having. Oh my gosh. Like, even as I'm saying it, like my shoulders drop down. That how many of us had the experience of as a kid, of sharing something, and it was too much for our parents. We weren't too much, but our parents didn't have the capacity to say, like, wow, you're really mad. That really makes you sad. You're really upset about this. That really disappointed you. You're really frustrated. To really be there and be present for us. And one of the things that Jen has consistently demonstrated to me is that my feelings do not overwhelm her. They do not scare her. She's okay with them. That she is really able to be present for whatever comes up for me. And it is so gosh darn refreshing. And so we talked about this kind of back and forth, but it was pivotal for me. And at this point, I realized there wasn't anything that I was doing wrong in this other relationship that I started talking about. That I have a right to be seen and heard. I have a right to share what's going on with me. Kind of the way that I've navigated up until now is I just don't bring it to the relationship because it leaves me feeling more wounded and hurt. Because this person asked, what's going on, I named it. So we have a plan to get together and talk. I have to say both of us are pretty taxed out right now emotionally, just with everything that's going on with me, looking at where racism shows up in my own life. Really opening my eyes to how much racism and oppression there is, and looking at how I've used my own biases to say that I'm not racist, and I am. It's exhausting. And what it's bringing up for me is I cannot imagine what it's like to be a person of color who cannot change their skin, who may fear for their life when they go out, may fear for their children's lives. I can't imagine that. And I'm hearing a lot of people talking about the guilt that they're feeling these days. And to me, guilt is I've done something wrong and I need to make changes. I can do better. Shame is I am wrong. I did something, who I am is not okay. And I think that as deep thinkers and deep feelers, we are going to have some big feelings around the injustices and what we're seeing. And we can use this as an opportunity to take action and to use our voices and to speak up. I just feel really strongly about this for me. And yeah, anyways. So the point being that this person, acknowledged that, I wanted to talk and we were going to try and get together last weekend and it didn't work out. And so we're probably going to try and do it this weekend. There's a part of me that's kind of dreading the conversation. And there's also another part of me that really is clear that I've gone for pretty much a year without getting my needs met in this area, and I've learned to adapt. And so this person may never change. And the intention in talking to them is not to get them to change, but to say, I need to let you know, I don't talk about these things because when I do, it triggers stuff for you and it feels hurtful to me. And it feels like your perspective is that this is about me and we have a dynamic that we bring into the relationship. And if this is something that we just need to put to the side and I continue to not tell you how I'm feeling around these certain things, I'm okay with that. It hurts. I feel sad. I really would love to have that really close connection that we had at one point. And I'm not saying that those are the words that I'm going to use, but I'm just sharing what my intention is and talking about is to name it and say, I can't be 100% me in this relationship and I can't bring all of me. And I'm not going to do that if you're not able to receive all of me because of whatever it brings up for you. So I just was really surprised to see, and I have to say, even as I'm sharing these stories with you, there is like my little gremlin is going like, well, maybe it is you, and maybe you are being too sensitive, and maybe this is your attachment wounds, and maybe you do need people to say things to you a certain way. It's really hard when people say those things to us that we really take that stuff in. And then I really think that it comes from a place of wanting to know, like, am I doing this? Am I not doing this? And it can be very wounding. And I'm not laying blame anywhere. It's up to me to do the healing. But I can tell you the other morning I got up and I was not in a very good mood. And I was ruminating about this relationship that I've been talking about with this person. And something had happened with my husband the night before, and he made an innocuous comment, but with this kind of negative thinking about like, well, maybe I am really hard to be around, and maybe everybody has to tippy toe around me, and maybe everybody has to be very careful about what they say, and I need people to say certain things around me. And so as I shared this with him related to our conversation the night before, he assured me that that wasn't the case. And as soon as I had shared this, my need to talk about it with the person that I felt injured by, I did go into that doubt. Well, they have a lot of things going on, and I was being selfish about talking about it. But what I said to them was, I know you have a lot going on right now. I've been sitting with this for a long time, and if we need to wait and talk about this in the future, I'm really okay with that. So I had to remind myself of that. But I started having that negative narrative about what kind of friend am I? And I really had to dig deep. And I think this is what the take-home point is for anybody who's listening, that when we start doing this rehashing in our minds, which we're going to do, and we can make choices about how long we're going to stay there. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to talk to ourselves. So what I had to think about is, what kind of a friend am I? Man, I am such a loyal, dedicated friend. And to the best of my knowledge, I am incredibly kind and respectful and thoughtful with my words. And sometimes the things that I feel like this person has said to me, whether they were intentional or not, have hurt. It's stung. And, every relationship has things in it that we don't really care about. But I feel like in my friendships, not my marriage, that's a whole other 12 podcast episodes. In my friendships, I really am incredibly mindful about what I say and what I choose to share and not share regarding other people's limitations. My gremlins are up because they're just going like, oh, this is just all BS right now. This is just all BS. I just have to go with that. I've been really it's been really hard. I haven't wanted to sit down and record. It's been a really hard time for this very tenderhearted person in this world that has so many things going on. But anyways, I really talk to myself about the strengths that I have as a friend. And I'm very clear that, of course I have fantasies. Like, I want the whole world to be around about me, and I want everybody to tell me how great I am, and I want everybody to be available for me and to do everything that I love. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Do I really want that? And do I want people to sacrifice who they are and to give up what they need from me? Absolutely not. And I'm really a very strong proponent of, I can tell you what's going on and what I like. And I don't want anybody to do anything that they wouldn't want to in a relationship with me. And it's really nice that I've been cultivating a few other relationships and have just been incredibly transparent. And the level of intimacy and closeness that I have is just great. I have a dear Canadian friend who we speak daily, sometimes a few times a day. Sometimes we go a couple days without talking. But I got to tell you, through this pandemic, it has been so nice to have that connection, because I have a really high need for connection. And I love talking about the ins and outs of my day. And if I only talk to you every couple of months, I'm not going to tell you about the minutia. But sometimes I really want to talk about the minutia. Everybody has a different level of connection, a different need for connection. Our lives change and what we need changes, relationships shift and change. So there's no right or wrong. It's just about finding someone who's a good match. And this Canadian friend who likes to remain anonymous has, we've talked about, like, I'm kind of afraid that this may change over time. Or maybe when I thought maybe we're trauma bonding over the pandemic. Maybe we are. Maybe when the pandemic is over, we'll not need to have such close contact. But I don't want to judge it. I really want to appreciate it, because it honestly has gotten me through this just incredibly challenging part of history that we are all living. So what I would really encourage you to do is, if you have relationships where you're not sure, is it them, is it me? If you have somebody who's trusted that you can get feedback from, I think there's so much friendship wounding and we don't talk about it. And many of us have been hurt in relationships. I think sometimes as HSPs, we just, I don't know that we're always, I think sometimes we share too much too fast, and we don't really test relationships to see if they have the capacity for growth and conflict and change. And then we get hurt and disappointed, and then we feel like victims. I see a lot of this in some of the Facebook groups, not my own, that I'm in. And I actually stay out of the groups because of that. I think that there's such an overlap of wounding and the trait of being an HSP, but people think that it's about being an HSP, and it's not. It's about that wounding. And I think many of us have a lot of friendship wounds, and we just compartmentalize and we say that it doesn't matter, but we have a lot of unresolved grief and sadness over relationships that didn't work out. So if you are having challenges in relationships, is there someone that you can talk to about this to figure out, is it some of your stuff? Is it some of their stuff? Is it all of their stuff? Is it all of your stuff? I think being able to tease that out so that the parts that we can own, we can work on, and the things that aren't ours, to know that they're not ours. And how do we work with that? And how do we work with relationships that have limitations? Because relationships are going to have limitations. What are the deal breakers? What are the things that you can work with? So I think that's my thought. I really hope you are all managing and doing okay. I may do an episode on what I'm seeing with the pandemic. I really see that this has been an incredibly difficult week. The people that I work with, the people that I'm around, are really talking about feeling discouraged, frustrated, fatigue, exhaustion. It's okay to take a break. It's okay if you are doing activism and your heart is hurting and you need to take a step back. That's just self-care. It doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get back in there. But we've got to figure out ways to take care of ourselves. And if you're someone like me who needs to push a little bit more and create more structure so that you're really doing good self-care, if you're someone who pushes too much and you need to pull back a little bit because the way that you override your feelings is by doing, if you need to get some help and support, feel free to, reach out to me. I do online coaching all over the world. We just launched one of the online HSP courses. As soon as enough people express interest, I'm happy to start another one. We really do have the capacity to have very deep, warm, intimate relationships. We go deep, we are loyal, we are conscientious. We just may not be able to discern how to get that in a relationship and where the limitations are in relationships. And being able to tease that out, I think, is really important, and to figure out what are the deal breakers. And I've been talking with a friend who's dating, and so we've put it in terms of like, what can you do to repel your dates? Because what this person often does is kind of holds back. And it's like, why don't you just be who you are and see if you can repel them? And then you kind of figure out whether people have the capacity to stay in relationship with you. So I just want you to have hope. My gremlins are going off again. It's just a great day for gremlins, isn't it? Yay! We really do have the ability to have that deep sense of connection and meaning. It's so important to us. I hope you're managing during this pandemic and whatever else is going on. We're living through a part of history. What can I say? Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you for being here. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.